Donald Trump as I can possibly get, and to be here particularly at the IPhT, where I'll be starting in January, which will be a great pleasure to do. So what I'm going to talk about is really what we've been doing for the last 10 years and what we're going to be doing for the next 5 as part of this ERC thing. But basically it's about looking for microstructure and understanding microstructure of black holes. The problem's been around for a very long time. The sort of earliest incarnation of this sort of story was almost 50 years ago with the Penrose process and the work of Christodoulou. And the basic idea is to think of a black hole as a heat engine. And you run the heat engine, nice rotating black hole, you drop something into it. But if you do it in the right way, you blow the thing up at the right point, you can get energy out. You have to break the thing up, break the particle up in exactly the right way, so you drop negative energy into the black hole, and you get some positive energy out. And so the Penrose process is all about thinking this in terms of thermodynamics and good old Carnot cycles. So you look at the work done by the black hole, and accompanied with that work done is a change in the thermodynamic state functions of the black hole, which is basically the mass and the area. Then you can show that they're related rather simply by the change in the mass being related to the change in the area and the work done. And the classic constant of proportionality to do with something called the surface gravity, which we'll say more about later. Even in the early 70s, people realized this looked exactly like the first law of thermodynamics. And there was a formal idea that perhaps the black holes had a temperature and an entropy. So then it was followed by a whole bunch of other laws of black hole thermodynamics, perhaps the most notable of which was Hawking's area increase theorem, which said that in any process, the area must increase. And then there was even, right down to the idea of Carnot reversibility. When you do it reversibly, the particle that you're dropping in exactly grazes the horizon, never quite making it in and never quite leaving the black hole. That's the reversible ideal of this engine. You seem to be missing the top of the slides, but anyway. So then the obvious questions came from this: if there's a thermodynamic entropy, can you see the microstate structure? And so in this reversible ideal versus irreversible process, it was realized that if you graze the horizon, it's essentially reversible. The nearest you come to that ideal, the smallest area increase you get. So you do it irreversibly, you drop it in, you get a significant area increase. And then Jacob Bekenstein came along and said, real particles have physical size, finite size, based on their constant wavelength. And so you can never quite get this perfectly grazing ideal. There will always be some area increase. And then he related it to the information loss associated with the thing being inside the black hole or outside. He then realized that indeed the entropy of the black hole in this way is counted by the area, in fact measured in Planck units, and he made a decent estimate of the constant proportionality. Of course, the whole thing was nailed completely by Hawking radiation, and it's sort of analog in the Penrose process, where you do pair creation in the neighborhood of a black hole, some negative energy falls inside, some positive energy escapes to infinity, and so the black holes polarize the vacuum. You get this celebrated result that there is actually a Hawking temperature, and that temperature is given, and normal units is the surface of gravity divided by 2 pi, or if you care about all of the constants, there they are. And so as a result, you learn a fundamental fact about black holes, that the entropy really is the area of the horizon measured in Planck units divided by 4. So we now know that there is entropy associated with black holes. But there's a problem, and that has to do with what is now called the information problem. But it all stems from these classical, beautiful theorems in general relativity theory that say that black holes are unique. What they mean is, you specify the black hole state functions, whatever they are, mass, angular momentum, charge, whatever. Once you specify the state functions, it completely determines the solution of the metric outside the horizon. And so therefore, normally it's expressed black holes have no hair. But what it really means is the microstate structure, if there is any, must be completely invisible from outside the event horizon. Hawking radiation also originates from just outside the event horizon. It actually originates just above it, typically as a pair creation. And so the Hawking radiation that comes up is as featureless as the horizon itself. And so therefore, Hawking radiation is almost featureless. It only encodes the box state functions of the black hole, like the angular momentum, the charge, and whatever, mass. And so general relativity theory and quantum mechanics tell you that black holes, no matter how they form, evaporate into a largely featureless, completely unique pile of Hawking radiation. So, to put it simply, you start with a star, you collapse it to a black hole. The exterior structure of the black hole is completely unique. So if you make a black hole out of trash, it looks exactly the same black hole. And if you really want to get rid of the politicians you can't stand, you make a black hole out of them. They all look the same. And perhaps some satisfying outcome, the result is as featureless. So therefore we have lots and lots and lots of initial possible states that lead to one final state of an evaporated black hole. And basically this is the information paradox. It says that you cannot unitarily represent this as an evolution on a Hilbert space. The fact you've got many, many, many possible initial states and lots and only one final state. If you want to know how bad it really is, take our local neighborhood big black hole. As the previous speaker mentioned, it's about 4 million solar masses in the middle of Sagittarius A. Its area in Planck units is about 7 times 10 to the 90 Planck squared. A quarter of the area is 10 to the 90, but that's the entropy. The number of states inside it has to be e to the 10 to the 90, but if and when Hawking evaporates in 10 to the 70 odd years, the black hole uniqueness says the end state is unique. And so many people have claimed to have the largest problem in theoretical physics, but I think this is probably the largest one I've ever seen. The fact that the number of microstates is not one. If you think in terms of general relativity theory, there's only one state the system has, one seen from outside, but once it evaporates, you can never recover the individual state from which it evolved. So this is the sort of setting of the problem we're trying to solve. So I usually joke about this, that I've been seeing talks on this for almost my entire professional career, and it usually was that in these talks there would be 30 slides, 30 transparencies, and the first 15 transparencies would be different, and the last 15 would always be the same, which basically said that essentially, let's throw a new solution, new way to solve this problem, and then ultimately it would come down to the same dismal outcome that nobody could solve it. The first real progress was Schrödinger and Buffer. So the first thing you do is you make the problem a hell of a lot simpler. You make the problem supersymmetric, and you turn off all the gravitational couplings. Newton's coupling, string coupling, and everything else. I'll explain why that's reasonable in a minute. So now, supersymmetric. For the purpose of this story, all it means is that they have their masses locked to their charges. There is also going to be some index stuff I'm going to mention in a minute. But why is it useful? First and foremost, the Hawking temperature of a supersymmetric black hole is 0. There's no time evolution, and therefore your problem of recycling information is simplified to one of just simply storing the information. You can heat it up later, but you've got really the information storage problem. Supersymmetry also makes things computationally much, much simpler. The microstates are all BPS states. Moreover, very importantly, the microstate structure is preserved under variations of continuous parameters. They are actually index states. And therefore, if you mess with the G Newton and G string, you have faith that whatever happens, those states are still part of the system. Okay, so vanishing G Newton and G string. Why is that useful? Well, Schrödinger and Buffer said, look, let's look for a particular system in string theory, D-branes. Doesn't matter if you know what a D-brane is. Think of it as a soliton in string theory to which strings can attach. So they stuck down some D-branes, and they looked at the way the strings attached to them and found that those things can carry momentum waves up these D-brane systems. And if you wind up with 0 string coupling or have 0 string coupling, you can actually analyze this system very simply with basic string theory. And you can count the degeneracy of states. Now, the whole point of taking this system is it's going to turn into a black hole once you turn on the G string or G Newton. But they looked at the perturbed states in this very simplified system, and they counted the number of microstates, and they found a certain number which depended on the charges of the thermodynamic quantities of the system, the number of 1 branes, number of 5 branes, and the amount of momentum you put on the whole system. And then a beautiful thing happened. You turn on G string, turn on G Newton, and on the money, it's exactly the right entropy. So you can cobble together a supersymmetric system whose perturbative states look and seem to cover exactly the entropy of the black hole once you turn the Newton constant back on. Okay, so the goal since the 1990s, that was 1996, has been to fix this. In particular, first of all, turn on Newton constant, turn on G string, so that the thing actually looks like a black hole, and then ultimately get beyond supersymmetric things. Okay, so the thing I want to get to now is really what happens when you start moving away in the first direction. We believe that when you turn on the G Newton, because they're supersymmetric microstates, they should somehow be preserved in some form or other. So the first question is, what do these things look like? What do they become when you turn on G Newton, G string? So this is the first thing we try to look at. But there's a problem. There's always some problem here that seems to be insuperable. And the problem goes by in the Horowitz-Polchinski correspondence principle. And it simply says, simple fact you know, you turn on gravity. Gravity gets stronger, it tends to compress the hell out of matter. So as you turn on G Newton, things get smaller. That's perfectly reasonable. So microstates go smaller, but horizon areas, or horizon radii, or short shell radii, are proportional to d Newton. So the problem occurs that as you turn on G string or G Newton, whatever Strominger buffer counted disappears behind an horizon. So you seem to be right back where you started. You've got a horizon, you've got the problem of Hawking radiation being utterly structureless. It doesn't seem to help, even if you can count it a la Strominger buffer. So this slide says dodging the bullets. There are 2 or 3 very important ways around these minefields. The first of which was a rather nice paper of Josephs and Per Krauss, which says, remember you're building it out of D-branes. And D-branes have a tension which goes inversely with the string coupling. So as you crank up the Newton coupling or the string coupling, these things get very, very floppy. You're putting momentum waves on them, so they're actually moving around a lot. And they realize you can actually create a configuration that grows in exactly the same way that horizon radius grows. And so therefore, you could possibly beat out the Horowitz-Polchinski correspondence principle. The second way to dodge these bullets is that basically, if you work in more than 3 + 1 dimensions, if you work in 3 + 1, all the singularity theorems are true. If you work in more dimensions, there are more things you can do. And in particular, all your Maxwell fields come with 2 classes of sources, pure delta functions or magnetic flux sources. There are Chern-Simons interactions. And so if you do the obvious thing, which is basically turn on gravity with a pile of branes, and use delta function sources to represent the branes, you get a singular electric source and a nice black hole singularity and a horizon, and you're back with the same problem. The trick is to activate the other class of sources which give you electric charge sources, which is to use magnetic fluxes. With magnetic fluxes that are cohomological, they have a nice intersection product that generates electric charges, you can actually source exactly the same class of charges but with a different configuration that is smooth and topological and robust to perturbations. And, better still, you can make a transition between these. You can actually dial a parameter which transfers you from the very, very singular source to the very, very smooth source. So, first takeaway message. String theory can remove singularities, resolve them into these very, very nice, smooth geometries in more than 3 + 1 dimensions. You've got to go beyond 3 spatial dimensions. But you've got to do more. The information problem is caused by the presence of a horizon, so you've got to get rid of that too. So, the goal of this whole microstate geometry program we've been doing is to do 3 basic things. Remove the singularities, remove the horizons, and then use that and then look inside there to look for the microstate structure. Now, the other thing we also, in the back of mind, we have to do is remain consistent with all the amazing things we've learned on last talk from LIGO. So, stringy resolutions, which we're trying to make of these things, have to be done at very large scales. 3 kilometers is the radius of a Schwarzschild black hole. So you've got to use things that are very long-range forces, and in particular in string theory, that means you've got to use the massless fields. So the definition of a microstate geometry is very simple. It says you want a smooth, horizontal solution of the appropriate bosonic sector of the low energy limit of a string theory, using supergravity theory, but looks asymptotically from a distance exactly like a given black hole or black ring. That's the goal. I wouldn't be here if we hadn't had a lot of success at this. So here's the sort of timeline to date. Joseph and I, and another group in Berkeley, came up with a very large family of explicit examples, including 2005. There's going to be another class of these geometries I'm going to mention in a minute. The key word here is scaling. We're going to talk about those, which we got a year or two later, and we'll say why they're important in a minute. But another really important shift in this game came from in 2009 with Mathur's small corrections theorem. So actually I had a conversation with Ed Witten at Strings 2009, and he came out with this classic old argument, which is really, a really serious issue until Mathur's theorem. He says the following: a black hole of one solar mass, Hawking evaporates in 10 to the 67 years. And the evaporation time goes like the mass cubed. So therefore, given the incredibly long time it takes to evaporate, surely some tiny, ridiculous quantum correction to general relativity theory can fix the problem. Some Riemann squared, Riemann cubed. Over 10 to 67 years, you can probably pull an elephant out of the black hole. So the answer is no. Mathur showed in 2009, using strong sub-additivity of quantum information, that to get the information out of a black hole, you have to make an order 1 correction to the Hawking states at the horizon. Physics has to be different at the horizon scale. So, another follow-up, which I did when I was finished up when I was on sabbatical here in 2013, was this theorem I proved with Gary Gibbons. So Gary is a kind of compendious knowledge of every single sort of no-go theorem in any part of supergravity or gravity. And so my discussion with him was he'd talk to me with, what about this no-go theorem? How did you dodge that? I think your theory is wrong. And so I go away and I work for DESA and come back. And eventually we found out where the errors lay, where the bodies were buried. And we repurposed the old no-go theorems about the fact that microstate geometries couldn't exist to actually showing that the theorem says essentially any coherent expression of horizon scale microstructure must be one of those from my microstate geometries. So often with microstate geometries I'm reminded of Mark Twain's quote that rumors of my death are greatly exaggerated. Well, Gary had a go and wrote a paper saying, no, microstate geometry is the only way. So in the last few years, what we've been doing is been trying to do holographic field theory in these geometries, and that's what I'll say a little bit more about next. Okay, so scaling microstate geometries. What are they? We can make a microstate geometry look just like a black hole. In particular, we can make a very long throat, and the depth of the throat is a classically choosable parameter. You can think of it as the redshift from infinity to wherever the new stuff turns up. That throat is an anti-de Sitter space, and that means you can do holographic field theory using that geometry, and use the full force of holographic field theory to understand what's going on at the bottom. The new physics in this story is really all about the topology and the cap and whatever's going on down there. Now, in the dual CFT system, I've alluded to it before, basically you're looking at momentum waves, in fact, in a 1+1 dimensional conformal field theory. It has a central charge of roughly n1, n5, the number of d1 and d5 branes, and the energy gap is highly orbifolded, and so the energy gap is tiny but not zero. How does this emerge in microstate geometries? Well, you look at this beautiful sort of topological stuff you've got at the bottom, and you look at the longest wavelength collective mode you can put into that. But then you multiply it by the redshift of the throat, and then the gap energy is given by the inverse wavelength of that fully redshifted collective mode wavelength. Now, for classical black holes, that number is 0. Redshifts are infinite at the horizon, so There's no gap energy. What we realized in this game was that, in fact, Z, this thing, is not a classical free, it's a classically free parameter, but even the most basic semi-classical quantization of the system tells you that it's actually a discrete parameter, and there's a maximal depth, and there's a minimal energy. And in sort of one of the remarkable triumphs of this game, we found that the gap energy was exactly what it should be. It's exactly the lowest energy gap with the corresponding conformal field theory. Moreover, it tells you that whatever this is doing, it's accessing the collective low energy states of the system, the lowest energy states, the softest modes in the system. Okay. Now, I want to just mention what the power of holographic field theory does here. So roughly speaking, when you have a holographic field theory, you have some UV limit, which is at spatial infinity, and then you have an energy scale, which is the radial coordinate. And in the middle is supposed to be the infrared physics of the corresponding conformal field theory. Well, when you make this geometric transition, you swap out the infrared limit. And so every one of these sort of bubble topological fluxed phases is in fact a new infrared phase of the conformal field theory. The holographic dictionary tells you in fact that the magnetic fluxes are dual to VEVs of order parameters of new phases. You can track this out. The scale of the topological bubbles is the magnitude of the VEVs. And in fact, one of the other things that we learned from holographic field theory is that the most singular geometries are pathological and are the wrong phase. And I want to say that this is not established so much for black hole physics. This was established by looking at holographic descriptions of confining gauge theories. It was an immensely powerful inspiration to figure out what's going on inside black holes. So the essential ideas of this are, microstate geometries really represent new infrared phases of the conformal field theory. The fluxes are the order parameters of that theory. Another very important conclusion is that there are two new scales in the black hole physics, the scale of the order parameters and the gap energy, and then the fluctuations of the encoding microstates. So the current foci, since I've only got 5 minutes, basically we're trying to look at how much of the microstate structure can be encoded semi-classically, classify these states holographically, classify the phase structure. So this is really more a sort of propaganda slide talking about what we're really doing at the moment. And the fact is that it's been a huge enterprise in the Paris area, particularly at Saclay and the IPhT. But it's also created a whole lot of spin-offs in terms of people trying to look at strings in these backgrounds. So these backgrounds are interesting for two reasons. They give you a semi-classical picture of the thermodynamics, but they're also backgrounds in which you can study intrinsically stringy things. What I want to finish on is where we're going. And the primary focus of what we're going to do, what we're trying to do next, is the dynamics of these geometries. What happens when stuff falls in? What happens when they get scrambled into the geometry? How does stuff get encoded into the microstate structures? How does the matter and information get returned to the environment encoded in Hawking radiation? How does the microstate structure, particularly these soft energy modes, play a role in interacting with the stuff around the black hole? Maybe we can get an effective viscosity and effective hydrodynamics out of this. So I'll skip that one. So let me just say a couple more words about this. Again, there was some theorems some time ago from Peron, Real, and Santos that said, look, matter gets trapped very long periods of time inside microstate geometries. This leads to nonlinear instabilities. Isn't this bad for microstate geometries? Once again, the death of microstate geometries has been greatly exaggerated. And Andre Poon and friends actually describe what's really going on. The instabilities are basically entropically driven to higher and higher frequencies, and the instabilities are simply the scrambling of matter into stringy states. We also found that if we looked at these geometries, tidal forces become large about halfway down the throat. The way I like to describe this is that deviations down halfway down the throat are tiny, but you're hitting them at the speed of light, so it's like driving a Ferrari across a cobbled street. You get ripped to shreds very early on. So we see all this stuff about scrambling from tidal analyses, from perturbative analyses, and stability analysis. But the neat thing we know is that microstate geometries do indeed and should trap matter for very long periods of time and scramble matter into microstructure. Okay, and so one of the things we want to look at is what is the evolution of scrambling, what is the back reaction, how is informing matter incorporated into structure. We've been doing a lot of calculations. The next thing also we have to do is realize that last imperative. We've been talking about what happens when G Newton is large, not zero. The next goal is to break supersymmetry. And so, basically, we have not very many examples of non-supersymmetric microstate geometries. But fortunately, there are beginnings of systematic methods for generating them. And what we want to do is find some nice, typical numerical examples of this so that we can see whether what we've learned about the supersymmetric cases will generalize here. Moving a little more quickly. The other thing that's really nice about microstate geometries is they're topological. The topology is very robust to perturbations, so you can hit it and it'll vibrate in a very non-supersymmetric way, and you can actually understand small fluctuations around the supersymmetric, so tiny perturbative temperature, Hawking temperatures are, I think, well within reach. So that's what we're going to try and do. I should probably finish. So I want to finish on another thing that I'm very optimistic about. The story with the microstates and fuzzballs and so forth tell us that there must be an awful lot of very soft, highly degenerate modes at the horizon scale. These soft modes interact and must scramble with incoming matter, incorporating to the microstate structure. Now, we're using semi-classical backgrounds, we're using supergravity as a way to hold up and understand these structures, these vibrations, these microstates. It might seem rather far from observable interactions, but maybe these soft modes can have an influence, particularly on other stuff falling in like accretion disks. And I want to remind you of one of the other remarkable things that came out of holographic field theory, and that was the story of what happens in quark-gluon plasmas. In quark-gluon plasmas, strongly coupled quantum systems, you want to predict the entropy to, so the viscosity to entropy ratio, or proper hydrodynamic properties of this. And it turned out that a really stupid supersymmetric calculation in supergravity gave on the money the correct hydrodynamic properties, or one of the correct hydrodynamic properties of that plasma. So the one thing I want to take a good message I want to finish on is, the one thing that supergravity is really good at is giving you universal effective hydrodynamic properties from very, very strongly coupled quantum systems, very complicated ones. And the black hole, CFT, and its perturbations is almost certainly one of the most complicated ones out there, but I'm optimistic we'll be able to actually calculate the effective hydrodynamics of these modes, if not the details of the microstate structure. And I'll stop there.
Questions for Nick?
Uber.
I don't see the 10 to the 19 on this.
No, but you don't feel the 10 to the 24 in this room, do you? But you do feel the effective hydrodynamics of the atmosphere. So, the 10 to the 90, where does it come from? Well, e to the 10 to the 90. So there are two aspects to this, one of which is we're going to try and sample. Okay, let me back it up. There are two separate answers to this question. One of which is we're going to try and give you some kind of effective thermodynamic limit properties of black holes semi-classically. And the sort of model I like to think of here is the way we got kinetic theory of gases. We got the kinetic theory of gases long before we got quantum mechanics, long before we knew what h-bar was. We just had to quantize the phase space. What we also had to do is essentially give some semi-classical description of the behavior of a gas that sampled the phase space sufficiently and sufficient fidelity to actually recover the thermodynamics from it. So classical geometries will never give you all the microstates, but they might sample it with sufficient fidelity to give you some decent thermodynamic picture. The second answer to this is, put on one side, maybe semi-classical won't give you everything, it certainly won't give you everything, but now you've got backgrounds to mess with. You take your favorite string theory or favorite object that you want to study in a background that can hold up that thing without forming a black hole. I perished the thought talking about firewalls, But seriously, firewalls, which cause all this fuss, were in fact utterly unsupported. The minute you had a firewall sitting there, they'd just fall in. They were in 3+1 dimensions. They could not be sustained. If you want to study a quantum phenomenon in the neighborhood of something like a horizon scale of a black hole, you do it in this background, these class of backgrounds. They are useful tools for studying stringy, heat-hot plasma effects in the basis of this thing. And the last comment, which is my slightly facetious from about the 10 to the 24 comment in this room, is that you may not be able to see all the details from the semi-classical geometry, but you should be able to get some effective hydrodynamics of those multiples. And that's my... So those are sort of three hopes for the... Sorry.
Any other?
In this picture, how do you view the evaporation issue? How do you see the black hole evaporation problem? Does it change completely?
It is. It's
what's happening?
You know, what we're doing is we're saying that at the scale of horizon scale, a new state of matter turns up that supports the material and stops it forming a black hole. In the same way that a sort of neutron star pressure turns up to hold it up, we have these magnetic fluxes that can hold it up, and then you can look at the states of the system on that substrate. And in particular, in the simplest examples that have been done, people have looked at linearized modes on these kinds of configurations and seen what happens when they collide. Those linear modes collide, and they create closed spin states that then propagate out. And in as much as you can do these calculations determinatively, the collision of linearized fluctuations on these bubble geometries can actually produce radiation that comes out. And it's perfectly normal radiation with colliding modes inside a structure. So it's supposed to demystify all of this black hole horizon stuff by simply saying here is a substrate on which there's all this stuff that can generate states that will collide and radiate. I don't know whether I answered your question. I'm still looking dubious.
I'm sure, but I have to understand.
Okay, let's take Nick again.